In a study released just before the pandemic, the World Health Organization called work burnout an occupational phenomenon. This phenomenon only worsened thanks to COVID, and it's a struggle Canadians and Americans continue to navigate today. But how do so many of us end up burned out, and what can we do to save ourselves? There's no question that the pandemic brought on levels of anxiety in the workplace. As companies packed it in to send workers home, others shutting their doors completely, a new level of anxiety set in. According to a study executed by Robert Half Talent Solutions in May of this year, close to 40% of the Canadian working population was burned out. At first glance, one might think this percentage was inflated because of COVID. But the truth is, burnout is its own pandemic, and it's been creating high levels of anxiety at the workplace for years.
It sounds like different people work at different speeds and can handle different workloads. One of the things you said when we were talking on the phone is that burnout is a phenomenon. Can you expand on that more for me?
Sure, burnout's a phenomenon, and really it's a process that happens, right? So what happens is, as people experience stressors in their job and the negative emotions and the anxiety that goes with that, this builds up over time. Now, actually, we're pretty good at deadlines. We're pretty good at one-off stressors and dealing with a busy week or a busy day or a stressful presentation. We can handle that. The problem is when those stressful events and experiences accumulate continually over time without getting a chance to break.
So your study was in 2016, and then in the Ottawa Sun, there was a study that was done in 2021. Literally the same results, saying 40% of Canadians are struggling. This is after COVID. So it tells me this has been something that's been ongoing for a long time. Can you talk to me about how super important it is that managers and organizations laser focus on taking this seriously and perhaps changing things in the handbook so that their employees feel more comfortable and know that there is room for this, for anxiety issues?
Problems with anxiety and burnout have, been something that we've dealt with for a long time, right? Before the COVID pandemic, it was costing the economy and companies billions and billions of dollars a year. Some estimates at the low end say that it was costing the North American economy from $3 to $5 billion a year, and that's minimum. So just from a dollars and cents perspective, if we want to put it together, what kind of that cost is, and obviously it was a problem before COVID. It's, COVID exacerbated some things. Some things in certain occupations are, frontline workers, for example, healthcare really exploded. Maybe in other jobs they got a little more flexible, but it didn't all go away. And there were other things in our life that we were dealing with that led to a lot of anxiety and burnout. I think companies got to take this the first step they have to realize is that it costs some real dollars and cents, the problem that we're facing and we're dealing with, right? So there's a real financial cost that they have to battle with. And that shows up in ways that maybe they might not think about. So take the employee who goes through the burnout process and gets burned out. What happens? Inevitably, they become detached from their work. They become detached from their colleagues. Their productivity first decreases and declines. That's followed by people withdrawing from the workplace. So now they're late more, they're absent more. Maybe they're going to start taking sick leaves. That's going to cost the company. That productivity just disappears. That's not replaced. There's not a person that steps into that. And ultimately, the employee leaves.
Before the pandemic, upwards of $5 billion was spent replacing burned out and overworked employees. This cost includes paying out sick time, paying overtime to other employees that pick up the additional work, and finding and training a new employee. Trudaco says this number could be drastically reduced if employers recognize burnout as a phenomenon and employees stepped up to speak their mind.
Critically, what companies have to realize is that if they deal with this in advance, if they are proactive in dealing with this, they will be able to circumvent those costs. When people are in a tricky environment and maybe those lines of communication are not open, part of that is looking for opportunities to open those lines of communication, frame it around, you want to perform at your best. You want to do the best job that you can. And what are ways that you can work with your manager to be more successful, right? And I think what we have to realize is that when people are overworked, when people are overtaxed, there just comes a point where we're just not effective anymore, right? I mean, we wouldn't push. And you look at it this way, right? I mean, if we had an animal of burden, something like a horse or a mule or a donkey, we wouldn't work that animal until it like collapsed. That would just be animal cruelty, and people would get in trouble for that. But yet we seem to be okay in a lot of times in letting people just take that burden and then look for ways to set boundaries. I mean, I think that's another thing, that there are, times and places for work, and there are times and places to get away from work and be able to get the recovery, get the rest, get the re-energization that you need to be successful.
For WPBS Weekly, I'm Jolene DeRosier.